right, warriors of the Iron Voice, lock the fuck in and stand up, because this is Panzer Unleashed. And as always, I'm your host, Scott Panzer Paulson, live here from Hack Studios. Once again, we are live on Spotify, YouTube, BitChute, Odysee, Rumble, and Podbean. So make sure to check us out on all those platforms at Panzer Unleashed. And that's right, I am the voice in the dark, your hammer against the corrupt, and your war cry for the truth. And I'm not here to fucking cuddle you, pat you on the fucking back, or sing you any lullabies. I'm here to rip off the veil of a system that's fucking rotten to its core, my friends. A machine that chews up the righteous and spits out their fucking bones. And today, we're going to be wading into the blood and mud of a battlefield most people don't even dare to fucking touch. And yeah, that's right, we're talking good cops. Yeah, the real cops. The one that fucking gets silenced. You know, they get betrayed and they get broken for daring to stand tall. And, you know, these aren't just stories, my friend. These are battle scars etched into court records. Whistleblower testimonies. Yes, sir. There are some good guys out there, but they always get silenced. And the cold, hard truth of a world that punishes, honor, and rewards the filth. And, you know, we're talking about the few, the brave, and the ones who wear the badge to protect, not to oppress. And you know, they get crushed for it. You know, the ones who see the fucking corruption, the brutality, the payoffs, and the cover-ups, and refuse to bow down or even get involved. You know, the system don't just fucking push them out. It hunts them, slanders them, and sometimes leave them bleeding out. And this isn't a conspiracy nonsense or fucking barroom gossip, my friends. This is documentation, verified, undeniable. You know, we're gonna go ahead and dig into some of these officers, just like Joe Crystal, or Adrian Schoolcraft, Frank Sapico, or Carol Horn, and others who stood against the tide and paid the fucking price. And their stories, they aren't just fucking warnings. They are a call to arms, my friends. So grab your gear, load up the truth, and we're going to go ahead and storm the fucking gates of this corrupted fortress together. And like I said, Uncle Panzer's here, and I'm bringing the fucking fire with me. So, you know, the thin blue line, you know, it's a lie when it comes to the good ones. You know, the system, they don't reward courage. It buries it. You know, it doesn't protect the honest. It protects the corrupt. These fucking cops out here didn't just face resistance. They faced a machine designed to silence them. You know, betrayal from their own people, threats, smears, even bullets. This is the warpath of the righteous, my friends, and we're walking into this case by case, exposing the fucking rot, and naming the names and honoring the warriors who refuse to break. So let's go ahead and tear into it. You know, I'm going to go through a couple of cases here. And this one right here is Joe Crystal, Baltimore PD. 2011, my friends. The city was a fucking pressure cooker. Straight crime through the fucking roof. The streets are bleeding. And a police department drowning in its own fucking corruption. And you had this guy right here, Officer Joe Crystal, a young cop with a fucking fire in his gut and a moral compass that wouldn't quit. You know, he stepped into the mess thinking he could get away and make something better for himself. And he wasn't some wide-eyed fucking rookie. You know, he was a guy who believed in the badge, who thought policing meant protecting the weak, not preying on them. But then he saw it, you know, a fellow officer beating a suspect to a fucking pulp, and way past restraint and way past reason. And Crystal, he didn't look the other way. He didn't shrug and say, oh, that's just how it is. He fucking reported it. He filed the complaint, and he stood by his oath. And what did he get for it? He got dead rats on his fucking windshield. You know, you heard that right, people. A fucking dead rat, just like the mob warnings. You know, that's the kind of message you get when you cross the blue wall with integrity. You know, it didn't stop there either. These threats fucking became a constant. And the whispers in the locker rooms back then, they scrawled in notes, they hissed over the radio static, and his own brothers in blue turned their fucking backs on him and froze him out. Made every shift fucking just hostile. And the department didn't just ignore his complaint. They fucking turned on him like a fucking pack of wolves. They pushed him to the edge, sabotaged assignments, denied backup, and piled on the psychological warfare until he just had enough. And he chose to resign. He was forced out. Not because he failed, but because he was too fucking good for them. And court records from 2014, the lawsuit, lay it all bare. Crystal ended up suing Baltimore PD for retaliation. And the documents paint a picture uglier than just back alley brawls, people. Supervisors knew about the threats and did fucking nothing. Colleagues openly called him a snitch, a rat. The kind of label that gets you ostracized, or worse. You know, the Department Internal Affairs. A fucking joke. You know, more interested in protecting the corrupt than fucking investigating them. You know, it's sad, man. Crystal's case wasn't just about one bad apple. It was about a system that fucking thrives on silence. That punishes anybody out there who dares to fucking speak. And he lost his career, his livelihood, and his sense of safety. All because he refused to fucking play dirty. In Baltimore, you say? The fucking city kept rotting, people. With the same corrupt cops climbing up the ranks, while good guys like Crystal walked away with fucking scars. And this is what happens when you stand up in the fucking departments that's more cartel than law enforcement. And Crystal, he wasn't just a cop. He was a fucking warrior of truth who drew a line in the sand and said, fuck you. And you know what? He paid for it. And his story is a warning, but it's also a beacon. And he's still out there, still fighting in this fucking day right now. You know, and a reminder that truth doesn't bend, even when the system tries to fucking break you. And they will. And just like in New York City, 2009, Officer Adrian Schoolcraft, yeah, the good old Big Apple, where the NYPD's supposed to be the gold standard of policing. But understand this, you know, that shiny little badge is a cesspool of lies. And Officer fucking Adrian Schoolcraft, he stumbled right into this shit. Because Schoolcraft was a cop in Brooklyn's 81st Precinct. You know, a place where the numbers game ruled everything. You know, crime stats were king. You know, keep them low, make the city look safe, you know, make the brass look good. Except it was all a sham. And Schoolcraft, he discovered his precinct was manipulating crime reports, downgrading felonies to misdemeanors, tossing out complaints, and even ignoring victims who came forward. Burglaries became fucking, you know, lost property. Assaults became disorderly conduct. And it wasn't just about justice. It was about optics. About keeping the mayor and the commissioners happy. And Schoolcraft just didn't sit on it. He fucking started recording secret audio. Hours of the shit, capturing supervisors, pressuring cops to fucking fudge numbers. I know, to make them all nice and sweet, you know, but he documented everything. The threats to anyone who pushed back, you know, this wasn't some gut feeling. This was hard evidence, you know, the kind that could burn a department to the ground. And he thought he was doing his job, protecting the public by exposing the lie. But the NYPD didn't see a hero. They saw a threat. And the retaliation was fucking ruthless, people. They didn't just suspend him. They went full Stalin. You know, in October 2009, NYPD brass sent a whole fucking team to his apartment. They didn't knock politely. They broke the fuck in, declared him emotionally disturbed, and dragged him to a psychiatric ward at a Jamaica hospital. Locked him up for 6 days, no charges, no hearing, just a straight up abduction. And they tried to paint him as unhinged, a loose cannon who couldn't handle the job. But Schoolcraft was smarter than that. He had his fucking tapes, baby. He had the evidence. And he got them by the fucking balls. And the Village Voice in 2010, the paper dropped a bombshell series. The NYPD tapes, that's right, exposing the 81st Precinct's corruption, and the department attempted to bury him. You know, the lawsuit followed Schoolcraft versus the NYPD, and it's filed back in 2010, and backed by his recordings and whistleblower testimony. You know, the case confirmed everything. The manipulated stats, the retaliation, the fucking psych ward stunt. And he settled for $600,000 in 2015. But, you know, money doesn't erase the trauma, my friend. You know, they took his career, his reputation, and his sense of security. You know, he was a cop who fucking believed in truth over loyalty. And they tried to erase him for it. And Schoolcraft's story isn't just about one precinct. It's about a system that protects its own lies at any fucking cost. And he's still out there, a ghost of the badge, a man who survived the machine but carries the weight of its betrayal just like me. And you had good old Officer Frank Serpico from NYPD as well. And if you don't know about Frank, you're sleeping on a legend, my friend. This is a guy who fucking defined what it meant to stand alone against a corrupt empire. New York, late 1960s, early 70s. You know, the NYPD wasn't just a police department. It was a fucking racket. Cops were on the take payoffs from drug dealers, bookies, pimps, you fucking name it. It was a circus back then. You know, the entire precinct was ran like organized crime. Shaking down criminals for cash, turning a blind eye. And Serpico, you know, a plainclothes cop with a beard and a conscience, saw it all. And he wasn't some saint, you know. He was a fucking street smart guy who believed that the badge meant something. But when he started to refuse the bribes and started calling out the corruption, he became a marked man. And Serpico didn't just grumble, he acted. You know, he reported the payoffs to internal affairs, to the brass, and even to the mayor's office. But nothing, you know. The system was built to protect the corrupt, not expose them. And by 1970, he was working with the New York Times and the Cap Commission. And it was a special investigation into police corruption, you know, and his testimony was fucking dynamite. You know, names, dates, accounts, you know, amounts of money, cops, you know, taking thousands a month, you know, just to let dealers walk. And it still happens today, especially here in Tucson and Phoenix, man, you know. And this guy right here, he fucking blew the lid off of the NYPD's dirty little secret. And the whole country fucking watched. But the price was blood. You know, February 3rd, 1971. Serpico's on a drug bust in Brooklyn, you know, raiding a fucking heroin dealer's apartment. And he's at the door, and his backup's behind him. The fucking dealer shoots him in the fucking face. The bullet rips through his cheek, lodges near his brain. And he's down, bleeding, screaming for fucking help, and his backup, they fucking freeze. They don't call for an ambulance. They don't rush to his side. They let him bleed out because Serpico was a snitch to them. The rat. The guy who dared to tell the truth. And you know what? He survived. Barely. Thanks to a civilian who called 911. And the Cap Commission hearings in 1971 and 72 backed every fucking word of his story. And the NYPD was rotten, and Serpico's blood was the proof. You know, and he left this department back in, was it 1972, and, you know, he was a pariah with bullet scars and a target on his back, and he lived in exile, straight bouncing around Europe, haunted by what he'd seen. And the NYPD didn't reform overnight. Fuck no. You know, it doubled down. It protected its own and kept the machine running. And Serpico's a fucking legend because he survived, because he spoke, because he refused to bend. But his story is a warning. You know, the system that doesn't just silence the good ones, it tries to kill them. And I'm living proof. Many assassination attempts on my life, my friends. And good thing for the good old third eye in your gut. Oh, see that? Anyways. But anyways, we got another one here. Like I said, I was digging through these reports, and I really wanted to bring this into the light, kicking and screaming. And here's another one up in New York. You know, Buffalo, 2006. Carol Horn. She was a 19-year veteran. A cop who'd fucking seen it all and still held on to her humanity. And she's on duty, right? Responding to a call when she sees a fellow officer, was it Gregory Kowitsky, choking the handcuffed suspect. Straight up, the guy was handcuffed. He's fucking choking him. And the guy's on the ground, defenseless in cuffs, you know, tight behind his back. And this guy's just wrapping his fucking hands around his neck, choking him, squeezing him, trying to fucking literally kill this motherfucker. And Horn didn't hesitate. She stepped right the fuck in and physically pulled the motherfucker off of him. Because, you know, what she is a real cop. And that's what they do. They protect life. And even when it's inconvenient. And even when it's one of their own crossing the line. And you think that she'd get a recommendation or accommodation, right? You know, no. Fuck no. Or just a pat on the back for saving someone's life. You're fucking wrong. Because the Buffalo PD didn't see it like that. Fuck no, they didn't. And, you know, they stripped her pension. They fired her. And her 19 years of service was down the fucking drain for nothing. All because she stood up for what she believed in. She broke the code. Their little unwritten rule that you don't call out your own. Even when they're wrong. And what's his name? Kowitsky. You know, he walked away scot-free. He kept his fucking badge, his pension. And Horn, she was out on the street. A fucking single mom. Scraping by, fighting to fucking keep her family afloat. And the retaliation didn't stop at the firing. They smeared her name, painted her as an insubordinate, a troublemaker. And she spent 15 years in the wilderness, battling in court, crawling for justice, just as I have. And in 2021, after a fucking decade and a half of struggle, a judge finally ruled in her favor. Her pension was restored, and Buffalo passed the Carroll's Law, a measure to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. But 15 years? That's not justice. That's a fucking system dragging its fucking ass and hoping she'd break. But she didn't. She stood tall, she raised her voice, and became an iron voice in her community. And became an activist. A fucking symbol of what it means to fight for what's right, people. But the cost was brutal. And her career, her stability, her peace, all sacrificed because she wouldn't let a man die on her watch. And my hat goes off to her. And like I said, I've been digging on these, and it's just, it's infuriating. It's fucking upsetting. And just like Chicago, 2012, Officer Sharon Spalding, you know, and her partner, Daniel Akeva, you know, were both part of an elite anti-corruption unit tasked with rooting out dirty cops. Sounds like a dream job, right? For a good cop, you know, fuck. Wrong. Nope. You know, they uncovered a fucking ring of officers in Chicago PD's narcotics unit, shaking down drug dealers, stealing cash, planting evidence. And Spaulding and her partner reported it to their supervisors, to the FBI, thinking that they were doing their duty. But instead, they became targets. And the fucking retaliation was textbook, people. Because Spaulding was reassigned to desk duty, and her case was sabotaged. The threats started coming in daily, the phone calls, anonymous notes, you know, watch your back, this and that. And her partner faced the shame too. And they were labeled rats in their department. And, you know, that valued loyalty over truth. And in 2016, they filed that whistleblower lawsuit backed by emails, recordings, FBI reports, and the city settled for $2 million. But Spaulding's career was fucking over. You know, she left the department broken but unbowed. You know, now an advocate for police reform. And Chicago's one of the dirtiest departments in the fucking country, you know, next to Phoenix and fucking Tucson. And Spaulding's case proves it. You know, she wasn't just silenced. She was punished for doing the job she was hired to do. And her story's a fucking gut punch. A reminder that even when you're tasked with cleaning fucking house, the house fights back. And that's a fucking sad story, my friends. And you know, we've walked through the battlefield, people. You know, you've seen this blood. You've heard the stories I've talked about, you know, Joe, Crystal. And you know, like I said, these aren't just names, people. They're beacons burning bright in a world that wants them snuffed out. They're the good cops, the real ones. The ones who stood against the fucking system that thrives on corruption. And that rewards silence and punishes truth. And they faced the machine. Rats on their windshield, bullets in their faces, careers torched, lives derooted, and it didn't just break there. They kept going. And they are truth shining bright in this world. And they are living proof that you can stand up to the machine and win. And they are the iron voice. The ones who remind us what the fucking badge is supposed to mean. And if you're out there and you're wearing that badge, refusing to bow down, know this. The target is on your back. That means you're doing it right, my friend. The threats, the smears, the betrayal, they're proof. You're a warrior, not a fucking pawn. Because the system wants you quiet, wants you to fade into the shadows, but Panzer Unleashed is fucking here to make sure the voice shake the fucking earth. We're not here to play nice, people, to compromise, to beg for fucking scraps from a corporate fucking table. We're here to tear it down, to expose the rot, to stand with the righteous until the walls crumble. And this fight isn't over, people. It's fucking never over. Because every cop who stands tall, who speaks the truth, who refuses to sell their fucking soul, you're the spark that keeps the fire alive. Keep climbing that motherfucking ladder, even when it's rigged to collapse on you. Keep shouting. And even when they try to gag you, keep fighting. Like I said, man, the odds are stacked against you. But the Iron Voice Society is behind you, amplifying your war cry and carrying your truth to every corner of this broken world. Once again, my friends, this is Scott Panzer Paulson, live here from Hack Studios, signing off. But, you know, the battle's going to rage on, people. Lock in across every fucking platform that we're on right now. Spotify, YouTube, BitChute, Odysee, Rumble, Podbean. Once again, find me on Gab at Scott Ryan Paulson, on X at Scott Panzer Paulson at PanzerFront14. And share this episode. Spread the fucking fire and never, ever go silent. Once again, out.